Today, we're going to be looking at the Nilfgaard cards for Claw and Dagger. And once we're done with this, I'll make a video, probably later today, with all of the cards and what I think about the expansion. But for now, let's talk about just this guy here, the Toxicologist. So he's a 4-power, 4-provision human for Nilfgaard, obviously. Deploy, infuse an enemy with, whenever a card enters or leaves your deck, damage self by 1. Then, if it wasn't a token, spawn its copy at the bottom of your opponent's deck. Interesting. Two things about this. One, it obviously works extremely well with Colgrim, right? And two, it works well with Colgrim without clogging the top of the opponent's deck, which is really frustrating, and I hate that mechanic because it just relies on how well you drew your opening hand, and kind of like mirror matches in a lot of ways. Anything where it just relies on how well you drew your first hand, I really don't like. So this kind of lets you play Colgrim stuff without worrying about that, because what's going to happen is, right, you're going to infuse something with this. Your opponent's going to have, because this infuse effect will be on the opponent's card, right? And then whenever a card enters or leaves your deck, meaning your opponent, it'll damage self by 1. So what you're going to do as the player is try and move things out of that player's deck, your opponent, right? So, or put cards on top with stuff like Viper Witcher. So obviously it does still go with the clogging stuff, but at least it also isn't putting the copies on top. So you're going to get some damage value out of this. Probably like around 1 a turn. Not quite 1 a turn, because usually Colgrim doesn't put something on top of the deck every turn. But you're just going to make a bunch of useless copies of them at the bottom of the opponent's deck. So this really hurts 2 decks in particular. One is the extremely popular right now Onslaught Golden Necker deck. They have to get down to enough cards at the bottom of their deck that they can make their Fuchsia with Magic Compass round 3. This will really prevent them from doing that. So that really hurts there. And the other thing that hurts is any deck that shuffles. Right, so Melitally comes to mind, right? As you shuffle every time you Griffin Witcher or something. And if you're shuffling, those garbage cards are not at the bottom of your deck anymore. So those are the 2 things that come to mind right off the bat with this. But this seems, we'll see how much more support there is. Colgrim is kind of an annoying deck. We'll see if there's a different way to play it here that's not just clogging, but this seems pretty good. It seems pretty good in Colgrim. So, let's see what else we've got. Well, I mean, before we move on, we should really mention that it's not necessarily only good in Colgrim. If the opponent's playing anything that gets out of their deck, like tutors, you could have an issue there. Because, say they Oniromancy out Saskia Commander. I mean, giving them a second Saskia Commander really is not good. But stuff like that, right? So the opponent can also use this to their advantage as well. So, again, that's where it's nice that it spawns on the bottom, because they probably won't draw it. But if they have tutors and stuff, they could. So you got to be careful with this one. I suspect we'll see a lot of funny highlights of people getting random stuff spawned with the opponent's deck they didn't want. Next up, we have Contaminator. 5-power, 5-provision, human agent. So we got an agent here. Deploy Banish. Oh, okay, hold on a second here. Sorry, Madoc players. You're going to have a problem. Oh, no, you won't, because the rest of the effect. Anyway, we got too far ahead of ourselves. Banish an enemy unit with 3 power or less. Then, if it was not a token, spawn its base copy of the bomb of your opponent's deck. So, you're not getting completely destroyed if you're playing Madoc, right? Because your next bomb will summon the Madoc out of your deck again. Never mind, then. But this is 5 for 5 with a 3-power Banish. This makes, was it Cyprian Wiles? The Banish 3 look terrible, by the way. Yeah. Hopefully he gets a he's going to have to get a rework or a buff. If you guys don't know who I'm talking about, give me a second here in the library. No, I don't want to create a deck. I want to go back. This guy. Cyprian Wiley is a 5 for 8 that banishes a unit with power 3 or less. He looks terrible compared to this, so hopefully he's getting buffed. In any case, this synergizes extremely well with the Toxicologist. You're going to banish something from the opponent. Note that it has to have 3 or less power, so you're probably damaging it, or it's going to be something weak with a deploy. And then you're giving them a copy at the bottom of their deck. And then, obviously, that synergizes with the Toxicologist, synergizes with Colgrim. If you banish 3 It is nice to have Banish. You might run. Well, right now, when you play with Colgrim, you can actually play most of the leaders. What I'm thinking here, though, is you play Imprisonment. Because Imprisonment does 3. That you can banish pretty much any big engine in the game currently with this. That seems really good. Yeah, this seems very, very good. It's an 8 for 5. It's not exactly 3 damage. It's a 3 power banish. It's not like a 4 power. You can't hit it down. Then Fire Scorpion. Obviously, you could do that in a different order, but you know what I'm saying. This seems very good. Is it good enough to make the full Colgrim stuff work? Maybe. Like, the Colgrim's not bad. The problem with Colgrim is just if you lose round 1, you kind of lose your Colgrim and lose the game. So this should help. Very interesting card. I'm curious if like a 3 power banish. There are ways to just use this. We'll see. It's very interesting. Next up, we have Sandor de Bacala. Probably pronounced that wrong again. He's a 5 power, 10 provision human agent. So his effect is going to be pretty good. Deploy, shuffle a card from your deck into your opponent's deck. Oh, here we go. Now this is interesting. Order, spawn a drone at the bottom of the opponent's deck and set its power to the difference between the number of cards in the player's decks. Whenever a card enters or leaves your opponent's deck, boost self by 1. So this is very interesting. First of all, the deploy. So you're going to give their opponent a really bad card. Right? You're just going to give them something bad. The question is, do you play a terrible card in your deck to give it to them? Or do you just give them the worst of the cards that's already in your deck? I think you do the latter. But there are interesting things you could do. I don't think this would give the card Spying, but I'm not sure. So I don't think this would synergize with Arthood. I don't think. It doesn't say give Spying. And Spying usually goes on something when the opponent gets control of it on the board. But anyway, you give your opponent something. My question is, it shuffles the card in, right? How bad of a card would you put in your deck to give the opponent? I mean, if you give them a bronze 4 pushing card, it will worsen their deck. So that's not a problem. It's always going to make their opponent's deck worse. It's going to be a really annoying effect when you draw it, just like all the clog cards. But at least it doesn't go on top. So then we have the order. Spawn a drone at the bottom of the opponent's deck and says part difference between the number of cards in the player's decks. So you're giving the opponent a drone. Now, unless this drone has like 10 power, it's also a terrible card. I mean, obviously, the closer you get to 10, it's like a 4 power drone, 5 power drone. It's also terrible. I think you just want to open with this and Crystal Skull it. Like, I think that's what you do in this deck. You open with this. Maybe you open Toxicologist first if your opponent plays a card and you're going second. But you play, I think you want to go first with this, play this, shuffle some garbage card into their deck, put Crystal Skull on it, the next turn spawn that 1 power drone at the bottom of their deck, and they're feeling really bad. I think that's what you want to do. Then and the second part synergizes quite well that too, right? Whenever a card enters, leaves the opponent's deck, it boosts self by 1. So on deploy, it goes to 6. So it's kind of hard to kill. You don't immediately get the answer like a Alzur's Thunder type 5 damage card. 6 isn't too hard. There's like Parasite and ways to do 6, but it's not the easiest thing. For a clog type deck, this seems very, very good. You're giving them 2 cards. One's at the bottom, so that's not too much of a problem. But the one that you shuffle in is, and if they ever shuffle their deck, that drone's going to be in there somewhere. And the fact that he gets 1 point per turn, looking at the new cards, it's probably going to be 1 point per turn for spawning stuff. Could even be more if you're making extra copies with Toxicologist. But yeah, this seems very interesting. I think this is going to be good. I think this will be good. The only problem is, it's the problem with everything, right? I didn't talk about too much in the other videos, but stuff like where like 50% of my games are Enslaved Tactics, you're not going to get this off against Enslaved Tactics. You're just going to steal this, use the order on you, and you're going to feel so sad. So it has weaknesses, right? It's like I said, this comes down. You use deploy and it lands as a 6. They're just gonna snap and slave that. So we'll see how good this ends up being. I think this will be very meta dependent. All the new cards are, right? Because none of them are really just, oh, we don't care about Enslaved Tactics. We don't care about Onslaught with Chiron Axe and such and all the damage stuff. But you know what? I'm not really worried about that when I review these cards because you never know what other things they're going to change in the patch. And overall, this does seem quite good for these type of decks. And it's very interesting. It will be very annoying to go against, though. Last card, then, we have Abduction. And I was wondering if we'd get something like this. So, Tactic. 9 provisions. Echo. Echo again. It's kind of weird that not all the factions got an Echo card, but whatever. I don't care that much that they have the same number of Echo cards. So, play a unit that isn't from your opponent's starting deck from their deck with a provision cost of 10 or less. Boost it by 1 for each provision below the limit. So, obviously you see the synergy here, right? There's 2 things. I think you have to be playing Sandor for this. Like, you can use Contaminator and put the copy in it. Or you can use the Toxicologist copy. But I think Sandor's really where this is at. For 2 reasons. First of all, I guess we'll go back here. When you use the deploy on Sandor, you give them like some 4 Persian card. You don't actually give them a bad card now. You give them a good card. But you have to remember that it has to still be in their deck, right? So it says play it from your opponent's starting deck from their deck. So if they draw the stuff you put in their deck with Sandor, you can't trigger it, which is a little annoying. So I think you still want to put a bad 4 Persian card in, or at least a standard 4 Persian card from your deck, because it won't synergize very well with them. But you'll always be spawning copies on the bottom of the opponent's deck with the other 2 guys we saw, and that's where this comes in handy because you know they're going to have them in their deck. And then you boost it by 1 for each provision below the limit. This is kind of Amphibious Assault in a lot of ways, right? Except that it's in the opponent's deck and, you know, it has to do setup and stuff, but whatever. If you just play a 4 provision, it gets 6 boosts, and you get it from the bottom of their deck. Interesting. I don't think this goes well with Colgrim, then, which I don't mind at all. I mean, you can still use the other ones with Colgrim, but I think this is kind of its own deck type of things, what they're going for, which I like. You already have the Colgrim deck seeming pretty complete. Play a unit from the opponent's starting deck with provision cost 10 or less. Now, the second part where I was talking about Sandor being kind of clutch for this is a drone is a 0 provision unit. If you give them a really big drone, you get, say you have like 10 card difference. You play this on the drone, which you know is on the bottom of their deck. The drone's 10 points. It is boosted by 10, and that's a 20. That is nice as a finisher. I think that this is really good. The deck as a whole, I'm not so sure about, but as a finisher and a card in that deck, this is really good. 9 provisions for a kind of Amphibious Assault effect for something that you gave the opponent, so you don't have to run out of all the copies in your deck. Although, to be fair, you kind of want to just thin your deck out of those 4 provision cards. But you can always play something bigger, too. Very interesting. Very interesting. I think this is a great payoff. I think this guy becomes more key because you really, really, really want your drone. You really want that drone, especially if you're going to go with this. So I think you really want to maybe even put this guy behind a defender. It's like that key that you want that drone because it's so many points. But it's also worth knowing you don't have to pick the drone. You can go with anything else. Very interesting. The mirror match is going to be ridiculous for this, but Nilfgaard mirror matches are kind of a clown fest anyway. A lot of them are. Have you guys ever seen a cultist mirror match? Or like a full assimilate mirror match? It just looks kind of dumb. And this might be one of those mirror matches. So I probably won't be playing this immediately because I don't want a mirror match for this. But whatever. In any case, this seems like there's a lot of synergy between these guys. And it doesn't seem bad. The only thing is there enough support already in Nilfgaard to kind of go with this? Because right now you've got 2, 4, 5, 6 cards that go with this archetype. Obviously, you have some of the Griffin Witcher, not Griffin Witcher, the Viper Witcher stuff goes pretty well with this. You put stuff on top of their deck with Viper Witcher, so you're going to be running that. You get the Viper Witcher Adapt, or if they have more cards in their deck, you get Boost. So it's like 8, that's what, like 10 cards for this deck already. At that point, you're probably going to put in Colgrim. And you have Colgrim, and you have this Abduction as a finisher. Probably want to play Cynthia, maybe, although the token doesn't work super well. Yeah, I think there's enough here to make this work. It probably does go with Colgrim. We'll see. This is an interesting set of cards. But that's it for the Nilfgaard cards, and that actually finishes up all the cards in the Claw and Dagger set. So later on, we'll be reviewing all of them, maybe some deck ideas, see what we can do. But hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Which cards do you think are the best? Which ones do you think are the most interesting? And we'll see you in the next one. That'll be it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And you can check out some more videos over here. And thanks for watching.